areas of Italy and certain areas of other parts of the world that were part of the Roman constituency, but were not completely independent. Okay? They were controlled by Rome. Rome had its soldiers there, so on and so forth. So when Caesar Augustus becomes the actual first emperor, this means that he has sole power. The Senate then, which continues to exist, but the Senate goes on. Oh, thank you, I forgot to turn that down. Yeah, just turn it down to low. All the way to low.
I did.
Did you?
I turned it off first because it was
Okay.
smoking.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's okay. No big deal. I'll get it. It cools eventually. So basically, what's going on here is that Augustus wants to know. He wants information. He wants a little more information concerning the area that he's in control of. And so that's why it says that Caesar Augustus sent out a decree, and that decree went to all of the areas controlled by Rome. Now, the areas controlled by Rome at that time were pretty much what Luke refers to as the world. Let me see if I've got a good picture of that. I don't know that I do. The world. What's the world that Luke's talking about? Well, okay, I don't have a really good picture of it. The world is the known world. At this time, the Roman Empire extends all the way, if you picture yourself a map of the world, all the way to what is Iran. Okay? And even some outposts beyond that into what we call Afghanistan today. So it goes all that way east towards China. It goes into Africa, Egypt, all the northern coast of Africa, down into the Sahara until you reach the dunes, where there's no life at all. It also then continues, it includes all of Europe, what we know as France and Germany and Switzerland and Belgium and Netherlands and all of that, Austria, Czechoslovakia, up into Poland area, down into Hungary, and over into what we know as the Ukraine. So that whole area is controlled. And across the British Isles, it controls the area all the way up into what is Scotland and a little bit of the island of Ireland. So as far as people knew, that was the world. And if you find pictures or maps of the world at that time, drawings of the world at that time, that's probably it. I mean, they know about China, they know there's more to Africa, but that's about it. That's all they really know. And they don't think there's much to it. I mean, if you look at the maps that are drawn at that time by scientific people, it ends pretty much at the Ural Mountains, which is 500 miles, 600 miles east of Moscow. It just ends there and goes a little bit into China and then ends. There's no thought really. India they know about, okay, they know about India. But beyond that, what we would call Southeast Asia, Australia, totally unknown, and of course North and South America, totally unknown to them. So when they say the world, they mean, if you looked at one of those maps, you would have to say Rome would control 75 to 80% of that. So as far as they're concerned, that's the world. That's the world. If you speak Latin or you speak Greek, you're part of the world. If you're not, you're a barbaroi, which is a barbarian. Okay. So that's the first thing you have to know, is that this was done for political reasons. This was done so that Caesar Augustus would have an idea of how much income he could gather from his empire, therefore how many legions he could support, and so on and so forth. Now the other thing that talks about this guy Cyrenius. Okay, when Cyrenius was governor of Syria, one thing you need to know, and this is important when you talk to other people about this that are knowledgeable, critics of the story of Jesus, critics of the Bible will say, well, at that particular time, 4 or 5 BC, which is what we know was the time frame of Jesus' birth, actually could be all the way to 8 BC, between 4 and 8. Cyrenius was not governor. No, he was not governor. Cyrenius was governor, in a sense, of Syria twice. He was governor at one time when he was a military governor. In other words, he was appointed as a military government. It was military occupation of Syria. That was the time when Christ was born. Okay. He was governor of Syria another time, and this was a political appointment made by the Senate. And so sometimes when people think about Cyrenius, when Cyrenius was first governor, well, when was he first governor? When he was governor like our governors, elected governors, political appointment? Or was he governor when he was head of a military occupation? The Greek uses the word governor both times. English would not. English would probably call him the first time something else. They would say, well, this happened when Cyrenius was military attaché, or something, a military ambassador, or I don't know, something like that. And so English, again, fails us here and gets us into trouble and causes people to doubt the story of Jesus. Politically, yes, he was governor the first time after Jesus is born. But in this particular case, he's governor of Syria, is a military occupation of Syria before Jesus is born, or right at the time Jesus is born. Okay, so that's you need to know that, because otherwise, you read a book or something and a story or a magazine article, and it tells you about this Cyrenius guy, and you go, oh well, then the Bible's wrong. No, Luke was very good with this history, and his Greek is not the problem. Okay, the Latin is not the problem. The English is the problem. That's the problem. Okay, so don't let that throw you. Okay, this Cyrenius fellow. All right, moving on. We've got, of course, Augustus and Cyrenius and all that kind of stuff, and then and so everybody went to his home, to his own city. Now, this too has been a mark of criticism by people. How did people know where they should go to be registered? And the registry then was the same as counting heads, if you will, or counting noses. And how would they know this? They would know this because the Jews, among other people, were very, very good at knowing their own ancestry, their own history. Just as we might know where our grandparents were born or our great-grandparents were born, they did too. It's not such an unusual thing, really. I mean, we think of these people as almost like cavemen. We think of them as so ancient, but they were actually pretty modern in many ways. Life was not that different. I mean, you didn't have the technology, obviously, but life was the same. Just as I know my father was born in Orange, California. I know my grandfather was born in Sebastian, Arkansas. I know my great-grandfather was born in Mississippi, in the same county where Jackson, Mississippi is. This town there is gone. It didn't survive the war between the states, and so on and so forth. I know that. You probably know a lot of places where your parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents, and even great-great-grandparents perhaps were born. So it's not so strange. Why did the Romans want people to go back to their home places? This is somewhat of a mystery. We don't really know. Did this apply to all the nations under Rome's control, or was just this something that the Judeans did, the Jews did? I think this was a blanket decree that everyone should go to their home cities, back to the place where they came from. This was to give, again, I think, Augustine and the rest of his government, the bureaucrats, a place to start. Let's go back to a foundational spot, a foundational place in time. Let's go back to our family homesteads, let's say. Let's do that and then go from there. So we get a handle on who we're dealing with. And again, you've got to remember that large groups of people, families, and much larger groups of people are moving around, always moving in history. I've mentioned this to you before, and I know it probably upsets you, and I'm sorry for that. But the whole business of migration, human migration, has been going on since Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and since the time of the Tower of Babel. Okay? Human migration. The people that are in Austria today didn't start out there. Those people that are in Austria today started out someplace else. The people in Ireland today started out someplace else. The people in England today started out in someplace else. The people who live in France today didn't always live there. Okay? The people in Switzerland didn't always live there. The people in Italy didn't always live there, and so on and so on and so on. Everybody, every genetic group, whatever, every language group, every cultural group you can think of has been someplace else at some time in their history. Everybody. And some have gone from west to east, some have gone from east to west, some have gone from north to south, some have gone from south to north, and so on, and so on, and so on. Okay? So, to say, for example, that the Native Americans, the people we call the Indians, the Native Americans, well, this country belongs to them because they got here first. No, they didn't. Somebody got here first. Most likely, wherever they are now, they could be in South America now. I don't know. Okay? But, the Indian tribes themselves, the Native American tribes themselves, displaced each other constantly. And this was long before Andy Jackson came and the Trail of Tears and the Cherokees and everything were put on Oklahoma territory and all that kind of stuff. They did that to themselves. The Sioux would run the Arapaho out and take over their property. Okay? The Paiutes would decide, we don't want to live here anymore, we want to live over there where the Cheyenne live. Okay? The Apaches would say, well, we don't want to live here, we want to live over there. And so they go over there and they take those people and they beat those people, and those people would have to go someplace else. That's human history, folks. That's human history. Okay? And it's the same with the French and the Germans and the Austrians and the Italians and the British and everybody else, and the Russians too, as it is with us. No different whatsoever. So these nutcase people that go running around, say, oh, everybody ought to go back to their original places. Well, good luck finding where that is, first of all. And second of all, I'm sure we wouldn't all fit in those places. Yeah.
Wouldn't us all then be in Mesopotamia? Because that's where human civilization is.
Well, go back to the battle, the Tower of Babel, yeah. We'd have to all go back to Baghdad, yeah. Good luck with that. That's not going to work. Although you could take the entire population of the world, did you know this? I don't know if I mentioned this lately. You could take the entire population of the world, 8 billion people, and put them all in the state of Texas and have room to spare. That's a fact. Okay? So, yeah, why would you want us to? Huh? Well, that's just, yeah. I don't know if they all fit in Iraq. Probably Iraq and Iran together, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, so migration's always been a thing. And borders have never meant a whole lot. Just get that into your head. When you start talking about borders and building walls and all that kind of stuff, just please understand, yeah, that sounds good, sounds nice, but it's the exception rather than the rule. The rule is human groups move. And they take over other territory, and then those groups move somewhere else, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that's the story of humanity. Okay. So anyway, why did they go back to the hometowns again? I think to give them a basis. Okay, we're going to go back to zero. We're going to go back to square one, and then we're going to track everybody from there. I think that was the idea. Okay, that's the only inkling I have. If you have another idea, that's fine. Anyway, this necessitated, as you know, then Mary and Joseph, both of the house of David. Now, how far back did their people of the house of David move to Nazareth? We don't know. The genealogies do not tell us. The genealogies gives us names, but the genealogies do not tell us where those people lived. Perhaps they all lived in Bethlehem, and it was just Joseph and Mary themselves that moved to Nazareth. That's possible. Or their parents that moved to Nazareth. That's possible. Or it may have happened 100 years before that. And so many generations from the house of David had grown up in Nazareth. I don't know. Or maybe they lived in Hebron for a while, or Beersheba for a while, or Capernaum and Bethsaida for a while. Who knows? We simply do not have that information, right? So, necessitates a journey. By this time, Mary is well along, about ready to give birth. Most people, again, a critic would say, this was crazy for Joseph to take her in her condition to Bethlehem. And normally, I would say perhaps that's true. Two things. Number one, Joseph is a law-abiding person. Judah belongs to Rome. Judah must obey the authorities. Okay? There have been examples before Joseph's life where you didn't obey authorities and you paid with it with your life. And he knows this. And so, though Romans 13 has not been written yet, Paul has not yet written about, being obeying governments and stuff like that. That's not. But that was an understanding of that time. So that's the first thing. Joseph is a righteous man, as we talked about last time, and Joseph is not going to disobey the law. Secondly, childbirth, though very dangerous then, just as it has been through most of human history, is still quite normal and was able to be handled by people without too much fuss. Right? A person like Joseph, again, he's quite a bit older than Mary, at least by 10 years, probably a little bit more. This being a first birth, of course, a little more difficult. However, I can guarantee you that there were a lot of people in Galilee who had to go back to Judah to register, and that they would not be traveling alone. That would be very, 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 very unusual. All right. So you're making a trip at this time once the decree gets out, and you're making a trip. Nazareth is up in here. It's Old Testament map anyway. Nazareth is up in here, and they would cross over the Jordan River, okay, south of the Sea of Galilee somewhere, usually around the Jezreel or the Jabbok. Cross, there was a ford up here. Then go down this side of the Jordan, away from the Samaritans, and then cross right across from Jericho, and then take the Jericho road to Jerusalem. And right south of Jerusalem, you would go past Jerusalem, frankly, and then go into Bethlehem about 6 miles to 8 miles south. Yes?
Now, if the wife and husband were from different families, what did they do? Go to the husband's town or the wife? Or did they separate?
I have no idea.
Okay.
We have no idea. My best guess, based on reading of the history of that time, is that it was the husband's house you would go to. This was where everything would start square one. That would be my best guess. Unless the wife belonged to some royalty of some kind or some other important dynasty, maybe go to her hometown. But my guess would be, and pretty much everybody comes from the same town. You didn't have a lot, aside from royalty, aside from prince and princesses being married off to each other across country lines, most everybody met somebody in their town and married somebody in their town. And people did not travel much. Once these big migrations that would happen, and then people pretty much stayed put for decades, if not centuries. And so it would be rare to have a situation where you'd have a guy meet a woman from some faraway other place and marry her. They were usually people that met at the well in town or at the synagogue or something along those lines. So it wouldn't happen very often. And when it did happen, my guess would be you would go to the husband's. Male dominance, etc., was the norm at that time.
Basically, they didn't recognize the woman.
Depending on the culture, yeah, that's true. Depending on the culture. Now, Roman women were able to inherit land, unlike many other cultures. Roman women were pretty well respected, especially if you came from a landowning family. But you're right, in some other cultures in that time, you're right, was basically property. Well, that's true right up until modern times. I mean, we still have the tradition, at least at some weddings that I've done. I just did a wedding last year where we still had the father of the bride. The question comes, who gives this man to be married to this woman? And the father of the bride says, I do. You know where that comes from. That comes from the Middle Ages, where women were basically property, and you were handing property off from one man to another man. That's all it was. That's all it meant. And I've had pre-marriage counseling classes with brides that really bristle at that thought and demand it be taken out. I said, well, that's not scriptural, so we can take it out. On the other hand, I have brides who are very traditional and say, I want that in there. I want my dad to say that. Or I want my mom and dad to say that. So anyway, Mary and Joseph are going, and they're traveling in a group. That's my point. They're traveling in a group. That's important because all the movies you see, including recent one done just a couple years ago about the birth of Jesus, First Christmas or whatever it's called, have Mary and Joseph all by themselves, Mary sitting on a little donkey, and Joseph and Mary all by themselves trudging over the badlands of Jordan, making their way, very difficult times and stuff, making their way to Bethlehem. No. Yeah. You would be idiotic. You would be a real moron to take your pregnant wife and yourself all by yourselves away from everybody else to a faraway place. And this is going to take a while. We're talking here. We're talking 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. 110 miles. And with a donkey and walking, if you make 7 to 8 miles a day, you're doing good. Anything more than that is downhill, but maybe you're only making 5 a day. So you figure it out. How long is this going to take them? It's going to take them a while. Okay, so it's a long trip. Normally, a trip to go to Passover, let's say from Nazareth, like when Jesus was 12, normally a trip from there down to Jerusalem to the temple would be about a 2-week excursion. So 2 weeks there, 2 weeks back. My guess is that maybe this caravan was quite a bit larger. Mary probably wasn't the only pregnant woman in this caravan. That's the other thing you have to know. Okay, Mary was not alone. Also, there were midwives along. Okay. Also, every town had midwives, and not just one. In any town of any size, like Bethlehem, would have a couple, 3, 4, maybe even more than that. Also, they're passing through Jerusalem. You could hire a midwife in Jerusalem. Jerusalem had midwives coming out their ears. They had tons of them. So you could hire one, bring them along if you wanted to. So a lot of things that we got stuck in our heads, Mary and Joseph trudging along all by themselves in the lonesome and the starry sky and the moon behind them and all that kind of stuff. No. They're with a caravan of people. They're fine. There are other women along to help Mary. There are nursemaids there that can help her. There are the midwives that can help her. So, she's not in any great danger. She's not in any trouble. Okay. So they come to Bethlehem. Remember, they have to go through Jerusalem. So again, they've been through a big town. Probably were able to stop there, probably able to visit relatives. probably able there to get something good to eat before it was a good day journey to Bethlehem. We also haven't stuck in our heads that they get there late at night, that Mary and Joseph arrive in Bethlehem at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and of course everything's all shut up tight, and please can I come in, we need a room, and there's no room in the inn, get out of here, you bum. That's a bunch of nonsense, folks. Just erase that from your mind. It didn't happen that way. Okay, you wouldn't travel at night in the first place. You can cover 6 or 8 miles in half a day. Okay, 3/4 of a day anyway. Especially the road from Jerusalem to Bethlehem was well traveled, well traveled. Okay, so the inn. Let's talk about the inn for a minute. Okay, these inns were not what you think. Okay, these inns were not Motel 6s. These were not Best Westerns. These were not Holiday Inns. Okay, an inn in those days was very simple. Usually, it was not in the center of town. Okay, it was usually on the edge of town. And an inn was basically a square. Okay, it had an opening with a gate. Okay, and this was brush, or maybe stacks of hay, maybe some thistle, or whatever, just enough to keep the animals from wandering away. Okay, that was it. Right. Then there would be stalls. How many ever stalls? I don't know. Most of the records I've seen, you have maybe 10, 12, maybe 15 stalls. Okay, the stalls, for the most part, would be covered with we call it a tarp or a canvas of some kind to give a little shade. They'd be bigger ones and smaller ones. And there would be enough room for a family, let's say, a family of 4 or 5 and some animals. Others might be small enough for a family of 2 or 3 and with just their pack animals, okay? So this is it. And there would be a well in the middle, or at least a place where water was available in the middle. And that's it, folks, okay? That's your inn in Palestine in the 1st century. That's your inn, right? So it's open. These openings are just that. They're open. It's just you've got a little partition. Sometimes it would be an adobe wall, other times not. But you would have these partitions, and that's it. That's all the privacy you would have. And as I've mentioned before, I mean, even most rooms in a common house in Palestine at this time didn't have rooms. Most houses didn't have rooms. It was just one big room. A fireplace in the corner, and maybe a table and not even chairs, a low table, and some straw on the floor for beds. Okay? And everybody ate and slept and made babies and everything else all in the same room, all the time. No big deal. Nobody gave it a second thought. That was life, right? Same here, okay? So the inn was not a good place to have a birth. When when our English Bibles tell us there was no room in the inn, bad translation. Or not a bad, I'll call it inadequate translation. Okay? A much better translation would be this. An inn was no place for them. Much better translation. Not that there was no place in the inn, but the inn was no place for them. That's really what it should read. The inn was no place for somebody like Mary in Mary's situation. The inns were fine if you wanted to keep a couple animals fed. The inn was fine if you wanted to keep a little rain off your head. The inn was fine if you didn't want to be eaten by the wolves and whatever. But an inn was no place to be having a child. No place to be having a baby. That should be done in a house. And most of the time was. House births were the common, no hospitals. Forget that. So they were sent someplace which was more private. They were sent to a stable, and it could very well be the stable was connected to the inn. Okay? Let's say that this inn was at the edge of town, and that next to the inn was a small hill of some kind, a hilly country. Bethlehem is always referred to as the hill country of Judea. Okay? And so maybe there's a hill, and right next to this place there is an enlarged area, a cave. Okay? And in that cave, probably has a gate across it, and in that cave is mangers or feeding troughs on the walls, along with whatever animals were in there at the time. And so you had a real solid roof over you, you had real solid walls around you, and you had a gate and probably a blanket of some kind for a little privacy, even though, again, they were not nearly as bashful as we are today. Nudity, nakedness was no big deal to them, whatever. But anyway, that's more like where the stable would be next to, adjacent to the inn, probably used by the inn keepers themselves or by other people in town. And so that was a much better place. So get away from this idea they were turned away by a mean innkeeper. No. And it was common to not just fill up those 10 or 15 places, but then to have people camp in the middle. And so it would be very unusual to have no room in the inn. Granted, people are showing up for this census thing, but think about it. They're going home. Where are they staying if they're going home? Yeah, family. That brings up another point, okay? People ask, wait a minute, how come Mary and Joseph didn't go to their families? If they're from the house and line of David, you would think there was other family members there in Bethlehem still they could room with, okay? Very good point. Very likely one of two scenarios is true. Either one, they do have family in Bethlehem, but other people from other parts of Israel have shown up there. Let's say they had family in Bethlehem, but they also had a lot of family in Jerusalem. And the family in Jerusalem, let's say they were a lot closer, weren't they? So if the decree comes on, let's say February 1st, well, it wouldn't be February 1st. Let's make it September 1st. So the decree is read in the public square in Nazareth on September 1st. It's read in Jerusalem on September 1st. Okay, which relatives of the families in Bethlehem are going to get there first? Nazareth or Jerusalem? Okay, so the spare room, okay, or the grandma house, is already taken. Okay?
Well, it could be that the family that's where the stable was at.
That's very likely, yeah. That's possible too. If the family has stayed around all this time, maybe the family is, fairly well known in the area, maybe they're fairly well off even a little bit, and might have animals, a flock or whatever, and this might be their familial cave. That could be. Okay? We know that 2 years after this, when the Magi show up, that they're in a house, because it says very specifically in Matthew that the wise men came to a house, not to a stable, but to a house. Okay? Now, how did Joseph afford a house? Well, maybe by this time he's in a house of a relative. Now, if they don't have any relatives, all right, the other scenario that's possible here is they don't have any relatives, but again, the town is full up because they're coming from further away than other people. Okay? And there just isn't a house, even of a shirt-tail relative, that's available. So again, they wind up in a place better than the inn. Okay? And they would be happy about this. I think especially perhaps Mary would be happy about this. Okay? And again, while to be exposed, again, was not that uncommon, whatever, common bathhouses and all of that. Still, you're 14 years old, 15 years old, giving birth the first time. Let's have a little consideration for the poor kid, right? And let's put her someplace where things are a little more private, right? Yeah, quieter. Even if you got a donkey or a sheep or something bad, it's better than think how noisy that would be. All those places open, and probably got a family of 5 next door, with their hot plate, cooking, tacos or something, and making all kinds of smells. Ladies, you remember when you're pregnant, smells. Oh boy, watch those smells, man. They make you sick. Just again, when you compare the inn to the cave, no comparison, folks, as to which is preferable. The stable, so-called, is much preferable than the inn. Much preferable to the inn. Yes, sir.
And it says that the common belief is that they were at a relative's house and she gave birth in the manger of that house.
So yeah, that's also possible that this could be a house of a relative. Yeah, that's true. But whatever it was much better than the other possibilities. Also, in many cases, these mangers would be cut out of stone. They would not be wobbly wooden structures. They would be cut out of stone and would be much more suitable to hold a newborn. All right, let's see, what else? Other pictures we need to get out of our minds, right? Firstborn son. This is another famous one too. And gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger. A couple of things here. We need to dispossess our minds, again, just get it out of your head, all right, that this was not a nice towel, okay? We're not talking about one of the towels you stole from Hilton Hotel, okay? Big fluffy things, all right? Swaddling clothes or swaddling cloths, okay? Here again, when women traveled any distance at all, if you're going even 10 miles, a day's travel, okay? Women normally carried with them what we would call to be sanitary products. All right. Now, in those days, of course, what these were clothes that have outlived their usefulness. So let's say a tunic, a nice cotton or linen tunic that had a couple of holes here and there. Finally, you've darned it, or patched it up as many times as you can. You just can't, it's stretched out of shape, it's just not workable. What do? Well, you take a nice knife or old-time scissors. Have you ever seen the old-time scissors? The old-time scissors don't have a fulcrum in the middle. The old-time scissors are like this, like a C shape, okay? And then the blades are here, and you cut them, and the metal goes back and forth, okay? That's the old-time scissors, all right? Anyway, so you would take your old-time scissors or a nice sharp knife, all right, and you would cut them in strips. And these strips then would be rolled up and would be kept in like a little bag of some kind. And so if you're on your trip, let's say you're going to see grandma, go visit grandma before she dies. It's 10 miles down the road. Let's say you got to go from Nazareth. Let's say you got to go down to Samaria, all right? His mother married a Samaritan or something. And so you got to go 10 miles out of town. Probably a day, day and a half trip, okay? Comes that time of month, you need to have something with you, okay? So that would be, and everybody had a good, fairly good supply, right? Now, on the convoy, of course, what you could do is you could say, hey, Mary here is having a baby. She's going to need more than just a 1 or 2 day supply. She's going to need enough to clean up the afterbirth and all the blood from that and whatever. Plus, she's going to have enough to wrap the kid. And this is what they wrapped them in. They wrapped them in sanitary products. That's what the babies were wrapped in, okay? And you would wrap them overlapping style like the Egyptians did their mummies so that the babies would be tight, okay, swaddled. That's why they called them swaddling clothes. They were actually swaddling cloths. But the swaddling cloths were the same as the sanitary cloths that they used for other occasions, okay? So that's what Jesus was wrapped in, okay? Simple as that, all right? People, for some reason, think that maybe people who lived 2,000 years ago, maybe their bodies were different, but no, no, they weren't. They were exactly the same. So if you ever get the question on Jeopardy, where did the swaddling clothes come from? And now you know. Okay, so you can win the prize, all right? So anyway, they wrapped the baby. And again, Mary would have help here. Mary would not have to birth this child by herself. The fact that either a wet nurse or a helper would not be named in the Bible does not mean she wasn't there. And also Joseph. Joseph was perfectly capable of assisting with the birth. Either, as the Romans say, because he had children already of his own before this, and his wife had passed away, or simply because he was an older person and was familiar with the kind of work that needed to be done. They did, in this movie that they did about Jesus, they did Elizabeth's birth, kind of interesting, or John Baptist's birth, different from Mary's. John the Baptist's birth was done in what I think was probably more probable than anything else, and that was in a birthing chair. And a birthing chair was actually more like a swing. It was suspended from the ceiling, all right? And it came to about, if this is the ground, it came to about a foot, maybe 10 inches to 12 inches from the floor of the room. Usually a pit would be dug right beneath the woman. She would be strung, in a sense, up, if you will, with her legs up in a W position, okay? And so this pit would be, and probably some nice straw would be put in here, all right? And there were even records about this swing, or whatever you want to call it, this chair suspended by a rope through a hole, through a hook, an eye hook, and that the midwives would literally pull up a little bit and then let go, and then pull and let go, kind of forcing the child out through the birth canal. You got to remember, people, no doctors, no hospitals for thousands and thousands and thousands of years before Jesus is born. People had come up with some pretty ingenious ways of helping the birth process along. For some reason, the same movie that showed this as the birth way of John did not show Mary in that position. Again, when you get to Mary, you have this angelic face, with a big smile on it, right? And a little baby in her arms. No muss, no fuss, right? Okay? Beam me out, Scotty, right? No. I'm sure Mary was just as exhausted as any of you were, ladies, and probably wanted orange juice and Oreo cookies right away. Get this kid out of here and get this bum out of here and let me go to sleep. Again, all of these kind of prettied up images that we've been fed all of our life did not come from the Bible. Okay, to get that out, it's not that the Bible's wrong, not at all. It's just the opposite. The Bible is very correct and very accurate in what it says. It just doesn't say a whole lot. And the problem has come with the church and believers. And, I understand sincerely they want to beautify everything, and I don't blame them for that, but it's not accurate. Okay. And you have to understand that when a lot of these things then are written and these translations are done in the 16, 17, 1800s, that's a long time from the time of Jesus, and they didn't know a lot of this history that we know today because of archaeology and all that. Okay. So don't blame them either. Just understand that the Christmas card pictures that we've been seeing all our lives are just not accurate at all. Yes, sir.
I was just looking at birthing positions of ancient days.
Uh-huh.
There was squatting, and exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you know why it changed to laying down in the lithotomy position?
Yeah.
It was easier for attendants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The woman had
Yes.
the baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not the,
Yeah.
but the attendants.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found that interesting. So
Yeah.
women suffer more.
Right. And a doctor once explained this to me. My second child, I think it was Sarah's birth. Because Chris and Sarah had the same. My wife had the same OBGYN. Nice guy, nice, kind of a comic, kind of a character, And I remember him saying something about, well, yeah, you're working really hard. He told my wife, he says, you're working really hard, but you only have to do this once. I have to do this 8 more times today.
Oh, funny. All great places.
He says, I've got, what did he say? I've got 8 in the bullpen.
But after they put them in lithotomy, they put them in reverse lithotomy.
Yeah, I know.
It's down further.
I know.
You have to push up
Yeah, it's crazy.
instead of
I
down.
know. It's crazy. We did see when Aaron was born, we went to a hospital in El Paso that I forget which one it was. We did tours of all the hospitals to decide which one we're going to. And they did have a birthing room. Birthing rooms were just coming around in those days. And they did have kind of I wouldn't call it a swing, but it was suspended. My wife took one look at that and said, I'll never get in there. I'll never get in. Okay, moving on. Do we have some time? Yes, we have a little time. Let's move on. So I think we've covered that, the birth of Christ. Let's move to the shepherds and talk a little bit about the shepherds. Okay, as far as the shepherds are concerned, in that region it says, in the same region. Okay, well, regions are smaller in those days than what we would consider. We might today consider the region of southeastern Arizona all of Cochise County. Maybe Santa Cruz County too, and maybe a little bit of Greenlee County. That would be way too much. For our purposes, for our thinking of purposes of how far did these shepherds have to travel, I think we're thinking, a couple of miles at best. So for our purposes here, maybe the region of Bethlehem would include, if this was Bethlehem right here on Snyder Avenue in Sierra Vista, Bethlehem might include to the airport, okay, and probably to, the supposed Sierra Vista airport, probably not quite the Hereford, maybe Golden Acres would be within that area. Fort Huachuca would be in the area. Not the river maybe, but Molson Road maybe. So that would be the region, So they would maybe have to travel a mile or 2 at night again. And again, we're not really even sure about that. When you look at the translation again, There's nothing here. Shepherd in the field, they're watching their flocks by night, but night again is a expansive word. Do they mean darkness? Do they mean the night watch? Do they mean the Roman night? Or do they mean the Jewish night? Good question. Don't know. The Greek word here is not the word for darkness, and it can be the word for the Jewish or the Roman night. What's the difference? Well, the Roman night starts at midnight. Okay. The Jewish night starts at 6 or sundown. And as you well know, there is a lot of light from the time the sun goes down behind the mountain until you can't see your hand in front of your face. What, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, right? Okay. You can still work outside after the sun goes down. Even though it's night, in Jewish mind, it's not dark. So did this take place at night? Again, you can't prove that. It would make sense for Mary and Joseph to get to Bethlehem around noon, maybe, or early afternoon. I would say Jesus probably could be born anywhere from 2 to 4 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock. It's impossible to say what the labors were like in those days. Were labors long like they are today in many cases? My wife's first labor was 36 hours. Even her last one with Emily, of course, that ended up in a C-section, but even before the C-section, it was 18 hours. She was just not a big kid, you know. She didn't have those nice big wide hips, right? So, you think about back in history, they don't make a big deal about this, except for Caesar, of course, Julius Caesar, from which we get Caesarian, because he was supposedly born that way. There is some doubt now whether or not that was true or not, but in many cases, the Caesarian mothers died. It was tough to sew all that up and stop the bleeding, so it was kind of a last-ditch effort to save the child, and usually that would only be done for royalty or for a very prominent person, as Julius' family was. They were the Clevians, I believe they were. Very, very well-to-do, very prominent family in Rome. And so it would make sense, perhaps, for Julius to be born Caesarian. There are, again, critics who say that that's not the case, but in any case, his mother, we don't know one way or another whether his mother died. Some stories say she did, some stories say she didn't. Anyway, it's just not known whether long labors were the case. My guess is because these women were in many cases quite sturdy, as we would say, usually worked. I mean, carrying water from a well, that's hard work. Carrying wood in for fires, that's hard work. Working in the fields, a lot of these women worked in the fields from the time they were little girls, 6, 8, 10 years old. So they're probably very strong. Their muscles were probably very well developed, and long labors perhaps were not a problem that they are with us who are kind of lazy, frankly, in our day to day. So that's what I say. You know, Jesus probably born in the afternoon. It's not necessary for the angels to show up in darkness for their glory to be seen, and the glory of the Lord. Glory of the Lord is a very precise term, by the way. Glory of the Lord always means the presence of God himself. And many times, the glory of the Lord means the presence of the second member of the Trinity, the pre-incarnate Christ, which is kind of mind-blowing to think about it, that the pre-incarnate Christ shows up to the shepherds at the same time that the baby Jesus is being born or has been born. That's a real crazy one. Now, it doesn't say the angel of the Lord, so we've got to be careful here, but it does say the glory of the Lord. And the glory of the Lord is the same thing that shone forth from the burning bush, and the same thing that was in the tabernacle, and the same thing that went before the Israelites in Egypt, and all that. So I mean, you can't be dogmatic about it, but it could be, the angel of the Lord, or it could just be the glory of the triune God itself. And you don't need darkness to see that glory. It wasn't dark, obviously, when Moses saw the burning bush. So, it just again, the pictures are there, very devout, religious feeling for people, but not necessarily true. Okay, one more thought I think I can squeeze in here in 30 seconds. One more thing. In verse 12 it says, "It will be a sign for you will find the baby." And sometimes it is made a big deal of that. Why did the shepherds go to Bethlehem? They weren't commanded to go. There's no word in there that said the angel says, go. But when the angel says, you will find, that's like, well, yeah. So we can't say that the angels commanded them to go, but we can say that certainly the angels gave them a good reason to go. Incentive and motivation, and saying, hey, here's how you can find this thing. Now, Bethlehem is not huge. It's not a gigantic city at this time. It's barely a village. And how do they find Jesus? How do they find Mary and Joseph? Well, we don't know how many of these kind of rock cave stables there were. Probably not a lot, maybe half a dozen or so. And when the wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger, so they're looking for a stable, okay, they don't have a whole lot to check. So I don't think that it takes a long time. Besides which, we don't know anything about the townspeople or anybody from the inn, if it was next door, or the house, if there were relatives in the house next door. We don't know anything about them, whether they were there to, welcome the little fella, which Jews were very welcoming people. Or let's put it this way, the birth of a child would be a big deal, as it was with just about any culture of that time, because the birth of a child meant you had another worker for the farm, or you had another worker for the family to put food on the table. And so this was a big deal. And so my guess is, again, the picture of the animals around with one or two little shepherds, I don't think that's true at all. I think, again, midwives are there, wet nurses are there, family members are there, and the shepherds are there. Of course, the wise men are not there yet. We'll deal with that next time. Yes, ma'am.
So, when did the star actually show up?
Okay, the star shows up much long before this. The star shows up in, at least so that the Magi or the wise men can see it, months before.
The star putting any light on
That's certainly possible. Now, the star was specifically for the wise men. And we'll talk about more of that next time about the star. But the star was not to show the shepherds where Jesus was, to show people in Jerusalem where Jesus was. The star was not for people in Judea to see where the star was, or Galilee, or anyplace else. The star was specifically for the wise men to show them where the star was, so this can be revealed to the Gentiles. So, again, the picture we have is of the stable, of course, and the star shining down on it. I don't think that happened. Not on the night Jesus was born. I think that, as the Bible says, the star moved to guide the wise men, so they followed the star. The star was then either obscured somehow, or God turned it off, or whatever. When they got to Jerusalem, they had to ask, where's the King of the Jews? Then they were told, Bethlehem, and then the star shows up again and settled above the house. Not above the stable, but above the house. So, this is a question, was the star always visible for that 2.5 years, the entire time? I don't know. It could be that the star was visible at times and not visible at other times. Like I say, God turning it on and off, if you will. Or it was visible the whole time, but it moved. This is why it cannot be a conjunction of two planets. It cannot be a comet. It cannot be an asteroid. It cannot be any of those things. It has to be a supernatural created event thing. It has to be a,
And then it had to be celestial.
well, yeah, it had to be in
Yeah,
the sky.
So
Yeah.
you have to take into account weather, clouds. what
Yeah,
is-
and we don't know when we say that, when we say celestial, are we talking even beyond the Earth's atmosphere?
Right.
It could have been beneath the clouds for all we know.
Well, I mean, but turning it on and off, it could have been him sending clouds. So you don't
It could be clouds, or like I say, it could be there the whole time and visible day and night. Because you can make a lot of wrong turns in the daytime.
Well, comets you can see during the day.
Yes, yes. But so we'll, like I said, we'll talk more about the star.
The east,
Huh?
they came from.
From the east, yes. Yes,
Following the star.
yes,
to Bethel.
yes. The star appeared to them. They're looking from here. They're watching the skies from here, Babylon or Baghdad, okay? And so this is the east, okay? Now, it's difficult to tell whether they saw the star in the east, which is this is the opposite direction from Palestine, okay? They saw the star in the east and followed the star as it passed over them and went west. See? Or is there another way to translate that? I don't know. Well, I do know, but I'll save that for next time. Okay? So there's a lot of stuff about the star, again, like the picture postcard Christmas scenes too. You got to rip it out of your head and you got to look at things a little differently in order to see the real picture.
Well, I think the Christmas cards nowadays, they make it to be a comet. Because it always has.
Yeah, tail, yes, yeah. Thank you.
Pastor, too.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody, happy Valentine's Day. Please do not.
Ah! Are you all booked up, huh? Yes, sir.
Wondering, when did it come about they went from BC to AD?
People in love.
I mean, obviously, he was born and then. passed away, and then
That was
exactly.
that was more than 600 years after Christ.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, they always used the
Have to go redate?
yes, they had to redate everything. Yes,
I was wondering how,
yeah, yeah.
was there any particular event that caused that to happen?
Just the Pope finally decided that it wasn't good practice to continue to use dates based on the founding of Rome, and we should use dates based on the birth of Christ. It was a Pope's declaration, and he assigned someone the job of figuring how many years from that day when he decided that it was back to Jesus' birth, and he goofed by 4 years.
Yeah, well, they were very powerful at that time too.
Oh yes,
You know,
very.
kings bowed to them.
Yeah, oh yeah, very much so, very much so. Yes.
They buy the cheapest they can get.
We also build Olive Garden to get drinks when we run out of drinks. That we've ordered, because it's hard to get it from the farm to the main distribution center and stuff like that. So sometimes, yeah, we have to lettuce, sometimes we run out of lettuce, we have to run over to Walmart and get cases of lettuce, because normally all that salad we've had is already pre-cut, frozen, and then it comes in, and I mean, that is why it's so crisp cold. Yes. Because it's kept in the refrigerator. And then, the only thing in it is lettuce. We open up the tomatoes separate, the peppers separate, onions separate.
Can I help you with that, Pastor?
Nope, I'm good, thank you, dear. Well, have a good time in the wind, Dave.
Did you have any comments on, Stephen Mice?
No, I didn't. I thought you guys were handling it just fine. I had to chuckle a little bit that Steve's latest one said, well, I've been over here all week, I haven't seen him. I thought to myself, well, yep, that sounds like him.
Well, considering that, Tony said Sunday, oh, he got hold of me, he'll be here Monday morning.
Yeah. He'll be here Monday morning, yeah, right. I believe that when I see it.
Well, upset with me, because I looked at him, I said, did he say what Monday?
Yeah, I know. What can I say? The guy's hopeless. I don't know how I frankly don't know how he stays in business. Whatever business he's in, I don't know what it is, but
It's like on, California News yesterday, they had one where guy up in Tucson, his crew went and ripped a woman's roof completely off.
yeah. And left it that way?
Well, she went out, trying to find out what the hell was going on. Well, they were 3 blocks away from where they were supposed to be.
Why are you being an asshole? And I said, well, I'm sorry you think that way. Because we were just talking about that. I didn't take it personal. He's having a bad day. So, and some people just use asshole as a, I know when I was younger, every other word out of my mouth was a swear word.
It was, I never swore.
Oh, I did as a kid. Up until about 15 years ago. 15, 20 years ago, I used to swear every other word.
No, I didn't until, well, I got